So hi everyone, thanks for joining in at like 9 p.m. today. So this is like our fifth session that we're doing. Today we'll be talking about the iconic rail journey, which is the Trans Siberian Railway. So we have a fantastic guest today, and he's going to tell us a lot of stories, and this one's going to be a lot of fun. So before we start off, just a little bit about Countryside. We're a 27-year-old adventure travel company based out of Mumbai. We do offbeat adventure holidays and leisure trips in India and all over the world. Besides that, we also do outdoor educational programs for international schools and outdoor management programs for corporates. So I know a lot of people are like itching to get out and holiday again. Unfortunately, this year that's not happened. But I'll just tell you a few things and just to keep you updated, right? So I'd written a mail probably 2 weeks back saying that we're trying to work out some monsoon hikes this year, but unfortunately we can't go ahead with that because the state government is not allowing us to conduct any monsoon hikes right now. Uh, Himachal Pradesh was under lockdown till now, and from the 1st of July they're opening up. However, they are thinking of quarantining people for 5 days to 7 days. So let's see how that works out. Besides that, Sri Lanka will be opening up from the 1st of August, and they're saying that they're not going to quarantine anybody. So that might be a holiday destination to look at, uh, like starting August, and of course later on from October and so on and so forth. Other states will also open up. For example, Andaman Islands will be opening up from October. So let's see how things go. Yeah. Perfect. So moving on, my guest today is Hans Bobson. He's a Chinese and Japanese scholar. He's been working as a tour guide since 2001. He is the tour director on the Zarengold and the Orient Silk Road Express. He speaks several languages: German, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Danish, and English. I'm sure I've missed out a few. But Hans, thank you for doing this and being here today.
Welcome. I'm happy to be with all of you.
Fantastic. So before we start off, Hans, I would like you to tell us how many times have you done this journey before, and and how would you describe this journey in just like say 30 seconds?
Okay, so counting every journey I did, I started in 1985. I did my first journey from Beijing to Munich by the Trans Siberian. And counting all the trips together from Moscow to Beijing and from Beijing to Moscow, it's been 46 times.
Wow.
46 times. And if you ask me to put into 30 seconds what this trip is like, I would say 3 very interesting countries, 3 completely different cultures, the longest railroad on this planet, going through deserts, going through high plateaus, going through forests, and going from Asia to Russia, building a bridge from Asia to Europe, building a bridge between Asia and Europe, and getting to know countries that are a little bit difficult in the perception of the West and probably also in the perception of the Indian people. And this is, I think, 30 seconds or 32 seconds.
Fantastic. So, can you just tell us a bit about the history of the Trans Siberian Railway? Like, was it meant for the military? Was it meant for transportation of goods or for trade? Or what was the reason of building this massive railroad?
For a brief history of the Trans Siberian Railroad, let us go back to the Crimean War in 1853, a little bit of history. I'm making it brief, don't worry, I'm not going through all the details, but let us go back to the Crimean War that Russia fought in front of his own door against France, the Ottoman Empire, and Great Britain. They lost this war because of a lack of infrastructure, especially transportation. And part of it was that they didn't have enough rail tracks and enough rail transportation to transport military material soldiers to the theater of war on the Crimean. Now, after the Crimean War, immediately Alexander the Second came to power, and he was very happy to introduce reforms. Amongst others, he freed the people who worked in servitude, the farmers. No slavery, no more. Reforms in military, reforms in the administration, and above all, in the infrastructure of traffic in Russia. So he was the one behind the intensifying of building of rail tracks through all of Russia. And by 1885 approximately, Russia already had about 12,000 kilometers of rail tracks, but only in the western parts, compared to 14,000 in Great Britain, compared to 69,000 in the United States. You can imagine that still was not very much. Now the discussion was, since at that time the big nations, the big powers were running a fight, the great game around Central Asia and for dominance in Asia and in Europe. Now for Russia, it became important to have a direct traffic link from the European part to the Asian part of their huge empire, from Moscow to Vladivostok, almost 10,000 kilometers, 9,200 kilometers. So that became important because of military reasons and also because of economic reasons, because the Tsar at that time wanted to intensify trade with China and the Far East, and also have more Russians settle in the Far East, so as to avoid the Japanese and the Chinese to enter into their own country across the border. So that was the underlying plan behind building the Trans Siberian Railroad. Now, this was supposed to be a purely, how would you say, a project that only the Russians wanted to handle by themselves, a patriotic thing. Very quickly, it turned out that they only came up with part of the money needed for building the Trans Siberian Railroad. 70,000 rubles or something. Needed were more than 325,000 rubles. That was the estimate for the building of the Trans Siberian Railroad. So quickly the Russians turned to France and to Belgium in order to borrow that money. And those both countries were very much interested in lending that money to Russia, because you know your history probably. 1870, the Germans won a war against the French. And ever since, even though France was a rich country and Belgium too, those two nations had been cornered to the western side of Europe. And they were looking urgently for some big nation to work together with against Germany. So they were very happy to actually loan Russia that money. And so in 1891, the decision was made to start building the Trans Siberian Railroad in 3 different places at the same time, roughly, starting in Vladivostok, starting in Chelyabinsk, Vladivostok, all the way out in the east, Chelyabinsk around the Ural Mountains, and around the Ob River, which today is Novosibirsk. There they started about 2 years later. But basically in 3 different places, they started building that railroad. It took, all in all, for the whole railroad to finish until 1917. So all in all, if you count, that's been 26 years to have it ready, to electrify the whole stretch between Russia and between Moscow and Vladivostok took until 2002. So a huge project, which more than fulfilled the expectations of the Russian government. This, in short, is a brief history of the Trans Siberian Railroad.
Wow, that is fantastic. So, but the Trans Siberian Railway has different components to it, right? And besides the Trans Siberian Railway, like we discussed the other day, there were also projects going on in Central Asia also, right? To build different rail tracks.
Right, exactly. So they have been from the start, has been part of that railroad, a railroad going from Ulan-Ude via Chinese territory, once to further to the east and all the way to Harbin and Port Arthur there. And then later in the century, in the 20th century, from Ulan-Ude down to Mongolia through Ulaanbaatar to Beijing, to the northern capital of China. That that railroad, I think, was finished in 1952 only.
Fantastic. Hans, before we continue, I think some people are having a slight issue with the sound. So I just
Okay.
request you to be slightly louder. That should do the job here.
You want me to speak louder?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine for me, but just be a little
Fine.
louder, that'll be fine.
Yeah, a little louder, Han.
Okay, fine. So if I go a bit closer like this,
Yeah, perfect, perfect, perfect.
can you hear me better? Can I have some signs from our audience, please?
Yeah, just check very quickly.
Then you see my great big fat face, also a little bit closer, and I talk louder, okay?
I think it's fine, Hans. I think it's much better. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Anyway, we'll move on.
Okay,
So,
I see audio is fine now. Thank you
yes.
very much, Kiran Ken Sampat. Thank you.
So,
Rahul also, thank you. Okay, now.
so Hans, like I know we will be running through all these places that over the course of this talk. But I'm just going to keep this map as a reference because not everybody knows where all the places are. Neither do I actually. So could you just run us through the map itself?
The trip from Beijing all the way to Moscow.
Yeah. So
yeah,
we're starting here in Ulaanbaatar, but you can start from the Beijing part.
Well, Beijing, we can just put down to the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Most of you might have been to Beijing already.
Yeah.
So let's start in the Gobi Desert. Actually, this is where we also enter our train, the Zarengold train going from the Chinese border to Moscow. So first, what you see, of course, is the Gobi Desert, where nothing grows and nothing ever will grow, probably in the future. What for me is always one of the greatest parts of the trip, that morning when we are about to enter Ulaanbaatar, and we are traveling through the high plateau of Mongolia. Ulaanbaatar is at a height of about 1,350 meters above sea level. And what you have is a lot of hills, and the railroad is snaking up the high plateau. You see horses, you see camels, well, now more and more cows as well, of course. You see yak. And normally what is great for all our guests that are traveling with us is they can make pictures from one end of the train to the next, because the turns are so narrow that you see the full length of our 600-meter long train. So that's one of the great things I love about that trip, right at the start. And then entering a city like Ulaanbaatar, that is part very modern, almost like Beijing. Many Chinese companies building high-rise buildings, new streets, but also ancient buildings, like you see here, the Gandan Monastery. Or when you enter Ulaanbaatar, what you see is the center is all modern, but around the most part of the city is still filled with ger camps, yurts, basically Mongolian tents. That this exactly, there is one right in time, and these give an impression of a of a very how to say it positively, of a traditional country. Like the many Mongolians still live traditionally, even when they live in Ulaanbaatar in these yurts. And normally when April is coming, they are leaving the town for their pastures. So they're traveling around the countryside for about 6 months and then come back middle of September, end of September, to spend the cold winter in Ulaanbaatar. And this is what you see right when you enter the city. So this impresses me very much. And of course, we get a touch of Lamaism, the Mongol Tibetan kind of Buddhism that some of you might have touched already, but there it is very much alive, even though under communism it has suffered. So seeing that, to me, these two different worlds is to me, very, very interesting to see every time I get there. Then, of course, we have a chance after spending one neat night in a nice hotel, next day to get out into the countryside, into one of the most beautiful nature parks that you might have seen ever. You see scenes like that, horses roaming around freely, yaks roaming around freely, camels, all kind of animals that you can imagine out on the pasture, goats, sheep, anything, even cows too. And we'll spend half a day out there, and we actually partake in what the Mongols call a Na'adam celebration. Na'adam means the three manly sports. This is horse riding, this is wrestling or fighting, wrestling, and bow and arrow shooting. And of course, the real Na'adam is only once a year in beginning of July. So normally what we do is we arrange a little or a small Na'adam, which to me is just as impressive. So this is something I love about the countryside in Ulaanbaatar. Normally, we leave late in the evening. Before leaving, we have a nice dinner in a good restaurant in Ulaanbaatar, and then we get on the train and heading north towards the border with Russia. A little border town called Sukhbatar. This is already Ulan-Ude. I'm just going through the border with you now. Sukhbatar and into Naushki. And then we have entered the Republic of Buryatia. Buryatia is about a little smaller than the size of Germany, but with only 2 million inhabitants. So hardly any people living there, and mostly of Mongol descent. What you see there, right in front of you on that picture, is the market or the big square in the center of the town of Ulan-Ude and the old Lenin head. This was supposed to be the biggest Lenin statue ever. But then the poor sculptor didn't get enough money to get the rest of the bronze, and he had to make do just with the head. So you see how humongously big this sculpture was supposed to become. He only managed to do the head with the financing he had. So, and that head was put there in the center of Ulan-Ude. Now, Ulan-Ude is a strange mixture of Russian, as a question, so does the train stop in these places and they are locked? Exactly, that's a crucial question. Thank you, Sandeep. I just received that. Let me pick up that question. Does the train stop in different locations and can we get out there? Now, the train stops in certain locations, and I'm going through with you now through every city and every stop we are doing. The first stop was Ulaanbaatar. The second stop, where we get out for 5-6 hours approximately, is Ulan-Ude, the capital of Buryatia. There we have a tour of the city. We'll have, if time is longer, we'll have our lunch in a nice restaurant there. And what we also have, we're trying to do that on this journey. We have a concert. We're trying to get as much music into our trip as we can without getting boring and boring you. So we had a concert already in Ulaanbaatar that I haven't mentioned yet. It's a cultural thing. It's something you should see. It's also very impressive. But here, what we do is we have a welcome concert and a farewell concert at the same time. Welcome to Russia, farewell to Mongolia, to welcome to one culture, farewell to another culture. And this is normally a concert just for hours, just for us in the National Concert Hall. Very beautiful little belly dances, children ballet. We have a throat singer, the most famous throat singer in Buryatia, and we have Russian dancers and Cossacks. So this is the welcome. And there will be a few vegetarians about the travelers. I'm just trying to react to some of the messages I get
Yeah.
in between, and I can just put it in, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. So Hans, what we can otherwise what we can do is we can, I mean, when as in when you think that you can apply answer those questions, we can do that. Otherwise, we can answer them at the end also.
Okay, fine. So if some questions I don't address right away, I will
We can
answer
talk
the
about them later.
questions
Yeah.
in the end, okay?
Yeah.
So vegetarian, yes, we have vegetarian food on the train and in the restaurants. That's that question.
Yeah.
So to me, the important thing of Ulan-Ude is that you see the city used to be part of the tea road. There is something like a tea road, like there was a Silk Road. Now, Ulan-Ude was the end of the tea road. And this is why some rich traders lived there. And you can see that in the city. So you will get a chance to see that, and you will get a chance to have that concert, which is just mind-blowing, I assure you. This is Ulan-Ude. And around 6 o'clock, we are heading back to the train station, getting into the train, getting ready for a nice dinner on board of the train, normally around 7:30. And then we are heading straight up north towards Lake Baikal. And always alongside of the one of the most beautiful rivers, the largest river flowing into Lake Baikal. What you see here is Lake Baikal. But this stretch basically from the border of Russia and Mongolia up to Lake Baikal is probably one of the most beautiful stretches that we will travel on the whole of the Trans Siberian. Now, we make it normally at around 10 o'clock at night towards Lake Baikal. Very often when the moon is out, we see the moon out to the right-hand side window. And the next day is our full day at Lake Baikal. Now, what you see here is the old Circum-Baikal Railroad that was built between 1903 and 1905. The stop that you see here is where we stop with our train, and we take a bath in Lake Baikal, if you dare. I've been in the water with many of our Indian guests already, I assure you. I even have a picture of it. I just didn't send it to Aditya because I'm too fat on that picture. So I didn't want you to see that. But this is a very beautiful place. Actually, it's a small village. It's called Palavinaya, kilometer 110. And this is where we have our picnic on Lake Baikal on that day that we are traveling alongside the Lake Baikal. Now, let me just go past this picture. We are traveling in the morning. This is already our barbecue, the picnic. Now, stay there with this picture, please,
Yep.
Aditya, because
Sure.
I am doing something, we do something more during the day.
Yep.
Because in the morning, we are heading from the city of Sludyanka all around Lake Baikal to the village of Port Baikal, which used to be the port where until 1905, the trains were put up on ferries and ferried across Lake Baikal. And you will still see the old settings there. And this is a very interesting thing to have. And we will have there our Lake Baikal cruise. We get all on a boat and get across Lake Baikal for about an hour, a small cruise, and then cross over into Listyanka, the little village on the other side of Lake Baikal. And there we spend some time. We go out and see a large museum, open air museum that will show you how the Cossack forts were built. Ancient Siberian houses made from wood. The Cossacks, I'll get to that a little later, but the Cossacks, everywhere where they stopped on their way from the west to the east in Siberia, what they first did is they founded a fort to spend the winter there, and then they built it up into a little village during the year when the weather became better. And this is what you will see there, like ancient Cossack houses and ancient Siberian houses. And then we go back to our train, and then we will travel to that place that you see now. And there we will get off roughly around 6 o'clock, right in time for dinner, before we can even get some of the nice drinks and the food. There we will take a bath in Lake Baikal if you like to. You don't have to. It's not mandatory, so you don't have to swim, don't worry. But if you want to, you can do that. And then afterwards, around 6:30ish, we will all get together to a big barbecue party. And this normally for me is the place where the whole trip gets together. You know, before you are so many people on that train, we have normally 14 to 15 nations on board, up to 180, 190 people in smaller groups. And everybody says hello, and you know, people are polite, but it's kind of, okay, these are all people I don't know. After that day, after that party that you see here, people had a chance to dance with each other, to drink with each other, to have a great time with each other, to see each other half naked if they wanted to. And then normally this train gets together into like a large family. This is my feeling. And this is one of the reasons I actually really like to do this trip again and again, because this trip is always about people and how people get together and how people first are strangers, and then, you know, in the end turns out, look, everybody talks to everybody and everybody speaks English on board, you know, even our Spanish guests, our Italian guests, our German guests. So this is what you see here. Do you have, Aditya, do you have some of the food that we are serving there as well as a picture?
I think I do, yeah, there we go. So I think you spend an entire day on the train, right?
Right,
next day.
exactly.
Yep.
So this, what you see now, this is actually our breakfast buffet, meaning you can sit down at your table and the waiters will take up your order, and you can have eggs, bacon and eggs, you can have sausages. If you're a vegetarian, you can have vegetarian breakfast as well. And if you would like to have a bit more, like muesli, for example, or some cheese, or different kinds of sausages or yogurt, you can get up and just pick that up for yourself. So that's our breakfast buffet on board. In all of our 4 dining cars, we have that. If you go one picture back, what we see is also very interesting. Exactly, because now, after the day on Lake Baikal, we have made it into Irkutsk. Irkutsk used to be called the Paris of the East. Now think about it. The Russians used to have possessions in America, all the way down to San Francisco. And all of that, Alaska, San Francisco, Ross Bay, was administered from Irkutsk and from houses like you see here. This is an old administrative building from the 19th century that you see here. And houses like that, you can still see hundreds and hundreds in Irkutsk. For me, Irkutsk is probably the most beautiful city in all of Siberia. And what we actually do here is also having a concert again. But this concert is something extraordinary. Has to do with a revolutionary movement in 1825. About 300 noble people and officers tried to topple the Tsar. Alexander I had died in November 1825. And there was a certain short time where it was not clear who would be becoming the next Tsar. And the revolutionaries used that time to actually try to grab power for themselves. Now, that whole thing went south and did not succeed. And the leaders of that rebellion were actually sent to Siberia. the question, let us know when the next Trans-Siberian rail trip is
I'll,
scheduled.
I will,
I'll be
I'll
checking
be,
data.
I'll be
No?
talking about that a little later.
All right, cool. Okay. So I'm going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is why some of them, and I'm just mentioning two names, Count Volkonsky and Trubetskoy, were sent with their wives to Siberia. Now, after working for 20 years in the mines, they were allowed to build their own mansions. And in one of these mansions, that looks quite like that one, we will have a concert, a basically reenactment of a concert in 1835 when Maria Volkonskaya, his wife, was starting with a saloon or salon for musical sessions, for concerts, for literary readings, and things like that. And this is why this family, up to this day in Siberia, is honored and revered as the bringer of culture. Now, we will get to know this family and this mentions and the people that did that, the Decembrists, they're called. So this is, for me, one of the really interesting and special things. I don't miss any concert. When you are there, I will be there too. This is Irkutsk for me, and really special people. And again, you want to drink some wine again? No. This is
So,
again the breakfast.
so Hans, the day after Irkutsk is the day you spend the entire day on the train, correct?
Exactly. We are
Okay.
leaving
Yep.
Irkutsk after having spent one night in a nice hotel. It's normally the Marriott Courtyard in Ulaanbaatar. We leave at around 8:30 in the morning, and this is when we have our time on the train until the following day before we get to Novosibirsk. So we are on the train from 8:30 in the morning, the whole day through and the night through until about 2 o'clock next day in Novosibirsk. But don't worry, this is not going to be boring at all. We are making sure that you not only learn Russian, which I'm sure is one of the reasons why you would like to do that trip or not. This guy on that picture is Valery. He is just pointing out the Russian alphabet. We do that in the dining cars normally. What we also have is talks about historical topics on board of the train. Usually I do these over the radio. So you all can tune into that. They're normally between 30 and 35 minutes on the conquest of Siberia, on the building of the Trans Siberian Railroad, on how Russia became Russia, subjects like that. But on that very day, what we do also is we would like you to get to know one of the passions of the Russians, vodka and caviar. So we have a vodka and caviar tasting. Here, oh, you see him there. We have one of our guides. This is Alyona. I think she's probably the most beautiful tour guide we have on board. And we can make sure that you will be traveling with her if you want to. Just let me know, okay, Aditya? So she is actually telling stories about the history of vodka without becoming too scientific, of course. This whole thing is about practice. And if you don't want to drink vodka, that's fine too. But it's just interesting to listen to the stories. And then with it goes always some nice food. Caviar, we have fish, we have something for our vegetarian guests as well. And just spend about an hour or a little more doing that presentation during our train trip. And for me, this is the Trans Siberian, because this is going to be the only time when you will be for any amount of of a long time on board of the train. And you can actually also just look outside and see how Siberia is passing by you. This is that whole day on the train with I taught on history with vodka and caviar tasting. And then what we have to do is also change times, because now leaving Irkutsk, we are actually winning time, 2 hours. Yeah. Going into Novosibirsk, we have 2 hours. And the good thing about this direction of travel from east to west is that we actually have more time together on board. We are not rushed after dinner. Oh, look, you sit down at 8 o'clock, and by the time you get up, it's already 12 o'clock at night because we have to take 2 hours away. Now it's just the other way around. You sit down at 8 o'clock for dinner or at 7:30, and you get up at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and you still have some time on the train. That's a fashionable and nice thing that you will not very often have. So this we will have 3 times in a row, next day as well, and the last day from on our trip from Yekaterinburg to Kazan as well. Now you see the map again. The long stretch between Irkutsk and Novosibirsk is about 1,800 kilometers. And from Novosibirsk to Yekaterinburg, we don't have that many kilometers, but normally this stretch of the railroad goes very fast. They were trying to build a high-speed railroad there, and they have succeeded half of the stretch, so we normally can go much faster there. But let me go back to Novosibirsk. We haven't been there quite yet. Yeah, Novosibirsk, what you see here, this is one of the many beautiful Russian Orthodox churches in the center of the city. What is important in Novosibirsk is, number one, Novo means new. It's a new city that only dates back until 1894. Therefore, you will not see many old buildings. I think this is Alexander Nevsky Church, not far from the Ob River. And in Novosibirsk, you will see the largest theater and opera building in all of Russia, larger even than the Bolshoi Opera. So also built by German prisoners of war, of course, until the late 40s, beginning 50s. That's when they finished. And Novosibirsk is the place where you should, if you are interested, try to buy black caviar. What we have been trying the day before is always red caviar, but there you can actually buy black caviar. Kind of pricey, but if you are curious and want to know how it tastes, this is the place. Just ask your guide and he will show you. There's a great market. You can go there and you fetch like 100 gram, and that's enough completely. So this is Novosibirsk, and what you see, of course, is modern architecture and a chance to actually see the Ob River, one of the largest rivers in the world. The Ob, together flowing into the Irtysh River later, is about 4,100 kilometers long, one of the longest rivers. Like there are many other long rivers that we are crossing that hardly anybody has heard of in the world, but these are just incredibly large rivers which carry a lot of water. And here we have the Ob River flowing through Novosibirsk. This is what I like about Novosibirsk. And of course, when we arrive at the train station, we are welcomed by a folklore group dancing and handing out bread and salt. This is the traditional greeting in Siberia for guests coming to Siberia. So this, in short words, is what I would like to say about Novosibirsk. And now we get on the train. On the train around 7:30, 8 o'clock, we'll have our dinner again, and we have a little surprise like always. I won't tell you that surprise. We have many surprises on this trip. And I'm not talking about everything we are doing. What we are trying to do is to give you more than you expect, and this is why I'm shutting up about that. So surprise that on that day too. Now we are actually heading towards Yekaterinburg, a city that has become notorious for a murderous crime committed on the Tsar's family. What you see here is the Tsar, his wife, and his three daughters and his son. They were killed there in July 1918 by the Red Russians. They heard the fighting outside the city. The White Russians were coming after them, and they thought they could not let the Tsar family escape, so they killed all of them between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. A sad story that you will hear from your guide. There in Yekaterinburg, we will actually visit the church on the blood that was built on the place where the house was standing, where the family was killed. Now, you all know in 2000 they have been made saints. The whole family is now considered saints in the Russian Orthodox Church. So you will see that church, and there's even that room is still left over, even though we can normally not see it on certain occasions only, but we are never sure, so we don't advertise that. The room is still there where the family was murdered. And maybe there is a chance for you to see that, but I can't promise that. Then a high point of that trip, you see me, big me, with a belly that is slightly smaller than the one I have now, and a bottle of champagne in my hand. And I'm standing with one leg in Asia and the other leg in Europe. So this is a famous obelisk. There are quite a few obelisks in the Ural Mountains, because what we do after our visit in the Church of the Blood is we travel by bus for about 40 minutes to that obelisk. So we will be in the middle of the Ural Mountains and have a chance to make a picture there where Europe meets Asia. And this is me with one of the bottles in our hand that will not last very long. What we also have there is a concert, again, music, with Cossacks, with a Cossack group that will give us 4 or 5 songs. It's a small concert of about 15 minutes only, but it just gives a very nice impression to have that music at that special point on our trip. So this is Yekaterinburg. And of course, you will have some time later on to get to know the city. There will be a little tour of the city, and you will have some spare time as well if you would like to discover parts of the city, the inner city, by yourself. So this is Yekaterinburg. By the way, also the center of Russian rock music, if you are a fan of rock music. So from there, we are heading back to our train. And now when we are on the train, this is usually also around 6:30, around 7:30, we'll have dinner again. You will ask, oh, are we eating all the time? And I will answer, not all the time, but almost all the time. So one advice is you can always say, please only half portion, or you can always skip, you know. This is what many of our guests do. We just want to make sure that you have enough to eat and you have good stuff to eat. This is why we are offering it. But if it gets too much for you, you can always say, no, please, only half portion or nothing at all. All right? So leaving Yekaterinburg on that day, within about 45 minutes, we are crossing through a tunnel. And this is the time, normally, when we leave Asia and we get into Europe. And then we will make our way across the Ural Mountains and into the Republic of Tatarstan. Well, Tatarstan is mainly a Muslim republic. It's one of the richest, I think, number 4 republic in Russia, and has a very special relationship with the central government. Very high standing. About 52% of the people living there are Muslim, 38% are Orthodox Russians, and there is no conflict whatsoever. People get along here. Traditionally, there are very good connections down to Central Asia, to Bukhara and Samarkand, and there still are. So you get to see that mosque, the largest mosque. It used to be in Europe for quite a while. I think 3 years ago, some other mosque, I think even the German one in Cologne became bigger. But this is still a very impressive building, and it is located right inside the Kremlin, or the old castle of the administrators of Kazan. Kazan used to be the center of a Mongol rest empire until 1552, when Ivan the Terrible actually submitted, or not submitted, subdued the Tatar people in Kazan. And since then, the Russians have been governing there, but letting the Muslims have their beliefs. So these two things, very interesting to see. You will have a tour of the mosque and of the ancient Kremlin as well. But what is even more impressive for me is the old city center. It still has the buildings from the 18th and some of the 17th century. It's a very famous university town. Lenin has studied here. Other famous Russian people have studied here. Tolstoy has been studying here. And what we on this journey would like you also to get to know is that this city is a city of music. This is a city with many schools for gifted children. So we will have a concert there with kids between 6 and 17 years of age that will just blow your mind. This is, for me, I think, one of the quite few high points that we have on this journey, this concert. If you don't like classical music, you will have a chance to just go for a walk, of course, but I suggest you go to that concert and you will love it. This, for me, is or are the important things in Kazan. So if you now go back on the train, what you will have is our last train on board, our last night or our last evening on board of the train. We will have dinner at 7:30, and it will be an especially nice dinner, of course, since it is our farewell dinner. And next day, we will actually enter Moscow at around 11:30. This is the great basilica that you see just outside the Kremlin. By the way, that one was built in the 1560s as a memory of the fight against Kazan, which was won by the Russians, of course. So this is when this basilica was built. In the background, the little white building that you see is the Kempinski Hotel, just to let you know. So we are now in Moscow, and right after we have arrived at the train station, we will not directly send you to the hotel, of course. The buses will wait outside the train station, and we will go and visit Moscow. There will be a visit of the Kremlin, normally, if it's not a Thursday. If it's a Thursday, we will have to do that visit on Friday, of course. But normally we visit the Kremlin at the day of our arrival. You will get to know Moscow, and by about 5 o'clock, you will be at your hotel. And believe me, you will be very happy and tired and happy to be in the hotel. So this is Moscow at the moment. There are many things we can see. We will also have a tour of Moscow by night. If you're too tired to do that, you, of course, are welcome to stay in the hotel. But Moscow by night is a completely different thing. Moscow has developed. If some of you have seen it 20 years ago, it's not the same city anymore, and it's become really beautiful. And part of it, of course, is a visit of 2 or 3 of our metro stations there. And they are like cathedrals. And I assure you, you will be impressed by just seeing the metro stations. So this is more or less the important highlights that I would say. I know it's been long already.
Yeah.
And
But no, but I'm sure people thoroughly enjoyed this.
Okay.
Hans, I'm going to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. We've got a few from our guests in any case.
Yes.
But if you don't mind, I'm just going to ask you a few questions here.
Yes.
So my first one is going to be, see, you're going through several time zones. You're managing people from, I don't know, 20 countries and over 200 of them. So how do you manage like the entire logistics of the train every single time?
We are working together, actually. Okay, just to let you know, this is me again, on stage in Ulan-Ude. What we have a team supporting us during the whole trip. We have agents in every different city that we are visiting. We have agents in Ulaanbaatar, in Ulan-Ude. We have agents in Irkutsk, along every city up to Moscow. So if we need bread, for example, or we need nuts and cheese, they will bring it to our train so we can load up on new food, for example. If we have problems with if we have technical problems, we have mechanics and technicians on board that will take care of these problems. If the aircon doesn't work in your compartment, just say, Hans, my aircon doesn't work, and the technician will come and he will make it work immediately. Time zones is something not many countries have experience with. Now, what we have is we have a daily program for all of our guests every day. And if there is a time change, we let you know on that program. Our guides, of course, will tell you also about that. And we have to take the time change into consideration. We have had, during my first 1 or 2 trips, I have actually made mistakes there. But after doing the 20th trip, I have not made any mistakes there anymore. So in the beginning, it can be troublesome, but now it's working out fine. And we have support all along the stretch. And what is probably more important also is we have a direct contact to Berlin. If our train gets stuck somewhere, that has happened a couple of times, I can call Berlin, and Berlin has direct contact to the Vice Ministry of the Railroads in Moscow. And I have had incidents where we stopped for 2 hours and I called Berlin, and within 10 minutes, we were on the run again. So this is the help that we have while we are on our trip. And of course, we have great personnel on board.
So when you say personal, I think some people have anyway asked this question. Do you also have a doctor or like a medical facility on board?
Yes, we have a doctor on board. We have an experienced doctor on every trip that will take care of our guests. Of course, we don't have an operation theater with us, which we hope we won't need and which we haven't needed yet. But if there is something more serious, of course, we will always be able to accompany anybody, or our doctor will accompany anybody to a hospital visit, which we hope will not happen. It rarely really happens, and normally the little things, a cold or a little inflammation, our doctor will take care of that. And if you need certain pills, he will arrange for them if you have forgotten your own. So we take care of the medical needs of our guests on board of the train.
That's fantastic. I think that's really reassuring for a lot of folks here. Yeah, so Hans, you've done this journey 10 times and 46 times, 10 years and 46 times. So I'm sure you must be having a few very crazy stories to tell us.
Well, we have a couple of crazy stories, of course. I don't think the time will allow me to tell you every story, but let me just pick out randomly. I just pick out randomly the one story when I was first traveling, or the second time traveling on the train from Moscow to Beijing. We got news from an explosion of an ammunition factory alongside our tracks, which didn't allow us or didn't allow train traffic along that route for about 2 days. Now, we were lucky because we arrived at the 3rd day, but we were told maybe we cannot go. So we have arranged already buses to go around that piece. And then the problem would have been, of course, to get another train, because our train couldn't have passed through. So we were very happy that did not happen. That was a crazy thing. We had, on my last journey, this has happened 2 or 3 times already. It can happen around Lake Baikal because there are quite a few geological movements of the earth. So there was a landslide, for example, and we are in Ulan-Ude, and Berlin calls us, guys, we are not sure you will be able to make it around the old Circum-Baikal Railroad because there is a landslide. But they said, normally the Russians are fast. And I was like, okay, let's see how fast they are. Well, next morning we all wake up, we get a call, all is fine, the Russians were fast. So we could actually go through. And maybe one or two more. We had an old man, 83 years old, on board of our train. And we were on the Baikal Railroad, the ancient one. And we got off that railroad, he and one of our guides, and the train started again. And they knocked at the door and nobody heard them. And the train drove off. And when we got well, they were kind of doing dangerous things, so they paid for that. But when we got to our barbecue ground, we were like, oh, where is Oscar? And oh, where is Anatoly? And everybody was looking for them. And then one of our guides said, oh, last I saw him was outside the train. All right, cool. So our train chief sent back the whole train, the whole 21 wagons, about 40 kilometers to pick those two up. And they were really cold. So this is another crazy things like
Wow.
that. But you know, you also have to be careful not to get off the train when you should not.
Yeah. Oh, that's a funny one.
Yeah, he became famous, you know. It was like, oh, this is Oscar. Now this is Oscar. Everybody was wanting to see Oscar on the train. So I think that's okay for now, yeah.
Yep. So my final question to you would be, why should someone do this journey at least once in their life? Because I know you've done it 47 times. So.
Well, the next time will be the 47th time. Let me answer the question in another way, in a way, why am I still doing this trip?
Yep.
Well, number one, for me, this is probably the most challenging, the most interesting train ride that you can do, and the longest that you will ever do in your lifetime. There is no longer one. Of course, you can still go about 2,000 kilometers longer when you go all the way to Vladivostok. What we are doing is 7,923 kilometers if we start in Beijing. You are actually throwing an eye, that's what it's a saying in Germany, you're actually getting an impression of a country like Russia that everybody considers the home of evil as the home of normal people. The home of people that are just wanting to have the same thing as everybody, a family, a stable income, a house and a car and a fridge. And what you do is also you meet people on board that you can exchange stories with. And you normally on this trip, you meet experienced travelers from all over the world. And to everybody, this is very enriching to be traveling together with 15 different nations, people from 15 different nations, different languages, and talk to each other and get closer to each other and understand more about the living conditions of people in the country they are traveling. But above all, you will never be able to make a longer train ride than this. This is my reason.
That's a good way to put it, actually. I think someone's asked me a question of showing the inside photos of the train. I don't have them in this presentation, but I will certainly mail them to you. So don't worry about that. And so Hans, you've got a lot of people interested in doing this journey with us.
Well, I hope so. I hope I could interest as many as possible. It is a fantastic journey, and I wouldn't say it if I don't consider it myself like that. Every time I am happy to get there, and I'm very unhappy actually this year. I can't get any train because of Corona, but next year will come. So, and I hope to see many of you on that train.
Fantastic. So Hans, just give me 2 minutes. Okay, so guys, so we are going to be doing the journey next year. Unfortunately, this year it was not possible. I don't have the pricing with me right now, but I'm sure I'll get everything done by next week or so. But the journey we're looking at for next year will be from Ulaanbaatar to Moscow is what we're looking at. It's going to be like a 14-night journey. The dates are there. It's 4th to 18th of August 2021. I know a lot of people have shown interest in this trip. So just drop us like on private chat. Just say that send me more details and we will mail them to you. So don't worry about that.
Aditya, just to add up, we are doing it till St. Petersburg.
Yeah. We're doing it in St. Petersburg. Correct. So Moscow, then you take a bullet train and you go to St. Petersburg.
Yeah,
So yeah.
Aditya, just one suggestion, because
Yeah.
many people are asking questions whether you can send them. You
Yeah.
already have email IDs of everyone who has
Yes.
registered. So just send it to all of them, the
We
details
will
that
do
you
that.
have.
We will do that. I will certainly do that. So I will send you the itinerary in any case. For the pricing, just give me some time. I will arrange for that. And Hans, thank you so much for doing this. I'm sure people really enjoy this. For your awesome stories and your insights into this journey. And thank you for taking the time out to do this.
It's a great pleasure. And I'm just very sad I couldn't see all of you. I'm happy to have seen you, Aditya. But and you, of course, Milind. But I'm
Yeah,
sad I couldn't see all of you.
thanks, Hans. Thanks for
Thank you very
coming
much.
and presenting it yourself. It was a great show. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All the best
Thanks,
to
Hans.
you, and have a
And
wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
thank
Perfect.
you.
I would like
Same
to
here.
thank Hans again. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Bhakti from across borders for also coordinating. And also Tim. Tim, thank you so much for getting all this in place.
Thank you,
Uh,
guys. All
Fantastic,
the best.
guys. Thank you everyone
Thanks.
for joining it. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be putting this up on YouTube in any case. So it will be that. Give me a day or two. I'll upload it on YouTube. Besides that, if you have any questions, please get in touch with us. We are more than happy to share more information on this. As you know, like my father and my mom have done this journey in the past. So feel free with your questions. All right, we will answer them. And anyway, Hans, thank you so much. This was really fantastic. And guys, thank you for staying up so late and being on this session. And yeah, thank you everyone, and have a good evening and have a good night.
Have a good night's sleep, all of you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good night. Bye bye,
Thank you,
Hans.
Hans.
Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.